Hello, and welcome to my brand new channel called Goat Scriptures. Goat Lodge is no more. The channel and everything on it was taken down by the enemy because it was too political and had one too many red pills on there. I wanted to make a new YouTube channel to begin with for a while, and the reason why is because I feel that with the Goat Lodge, it was starting to become a little more politically charged rather than dealing strictly with the occult issues at hand. So, Goat Scriptures, what I aim for that channel to be, is exactly what Goat Lodge was supposed to be, and nothing more, nothing less. We're going to be doing some book reviews, extensive analysis, and what I hope to do is start doing full audiobooks again. I have a couple ideas in my mind that I want to read cover to cover just to post, just because there's tons of PDFs of occult books out there, but there's very, very few audiobooks, of devotional texts or just, texts on sorcery or whatever. So the first book we're going to be looking at, we won't be reading it cover to cover, but we will do a pretty good analysis and review on it. It's this book, Sacerdotium, Umbrae, Mortis, The Priesthoods of the Shadow of Death by Gilles de Laval. Okay, this little red book here deals with the dark sorcery of the magic of Canaan. So everything to do with Satanism, the clip-off, vampirism, astral projection, and feeding off people while they sleep, and all that. This is vampirism in the truest form. Now, most of you in your mind, you think of vampires, you think of, bloodsuckers from the movie. That's not completely inaccurate, but vampirism is more or less an energy type of vampirism, and the current and the magic in this book there deals strictly with how to astral project properly, completely change your body into that of an astral predator, feed off people, while in the reverse order you are going to have communication with very hateful, angry, and deadly vampiric spirits, death spirits, dealing with the clip-off and dealing with the wrathful shades of Canaan from the bloodline of Canaan there. This book it includes the self-burial rite, and you'll allow yourself to be fed upon by spirits. So the first ritual in the book there, before we get into it, actually involves you inviting hostile spirits and entities and archetypes from multiple cultures to basically infect you with their hate and with their appetite. So let's just dive right into it. I spent the last half hour just putting tons of sticky notes in there. I mean bookmarks in there, because there's just so many pages and just stuff that I just want to skim over real quick. Okay. As an introduction, it has a very brief, warning like, hey, this shit is fucking dangerous. You can fuck yourself up real easily and quickly. The first thing that's really interesting about this book, though, is that Gilles de Laval gives a complete overhaul to the original Crowleyan clipothic configuration. And this chapter, from page 28, Corrections of the Clip-Off, in 30, he presents the Sacerdotium clip-off. So some names have been changed, and I've already made a video there It might be on John Caprine. I'll make sure it is there, where I actually did an entire whiteboard video looking at the differences between the Crowley clipothic configuration and the tree that Gilles de Laval presents here. But it's still the Ari configuration, and it's a closed system. It doesn't matter if you practice Kabbalah Qliphoth or the Sacerdotium Qliphoth or the Temple of the Black Light tree of Azerate Qliphoth. It's all the same. But just to give you an example of what has been changed, instead of Gamaliel or Lilith, instead it's Paraqualel, the obscene ass. And the reason why some of these names are changes is there's a lot of misspellings and just gibberish and shit in the the Crowleyan Qliphoth. Let me give you an example. Yeah, Björgepoth. So this was the replacement for the Qliphothian Mars, sometimes called Golachab or Golachab, in the Crowleyan Kabbalah Qliphoth. The original name for this Qliphotic power is Golachab or Golab. However, the problem is that the Hebrew words have no intelligible translation. The Hebrew name can be translated as Golachab. It is a contraction of the words Gol Kab, which means heart spring or heart basin. In other words, the contents and desires of the affection of the heart or bosom. This meaning can be hardly considered to be a foil of the Sephra of Gevurah, which denotes strength, might, valor, and bravery. The opposite quality of having a stout and passionate heart can be seen as a contributing factor to valor, strength, and bravery. Therefore, it's best that Golab be considered as much a reinforcement or alternative word for the sphere of Gevurah, much in the same way that the word Gamliel incorrectly is considered a foil for the Sephra of Yesod, as in fact support an idea that the sphere CF Klippa or Paraquelv QV. To reconstruct the anti-sphere of Gevurah retain its meaning of burning bodies, the name Klippa has been changed to Björgepoth, which means burning bodies or burning corpses. The demonic order of the sphere is the Usiziel, or ruins of God, is a correction from the original Usiel, which is based on a misspelling of Hebrew. So just to let you know, and the main reason why I made that video back then is when I saw this, like, I knew right away that Aleister Crowley, Eliphas Levi, and those guys, they were never giving you the Qliphoth. They were never giving you the real names, the real demonic names in Hebrew for the Qliphoth. They were just giving you an alternative spelling for Yesod, an alternative spelling for Gevurah, and so on. So whether you're working with Aleister Crowley's Qliphoth or Tree of Night, if you're working with the Night Side, if you're working with the Sephiroth, it's really the same thing. Now this is probably the closest thing you can get to the Qliphoth, but it's really all the same thing, and sooner or later you'll hit that ceiling. My views have changed on that. I no longer support any of this Kabbalah Qliphoth or Sacerdotium Qliphoth there. And the reasons why is I have videos on John Caprine about this subject. So, from the very bottom sphere, Melkuth Lila, to both Tomiel spheres, the whole chapter is the corrections to the Sacerdotium Qliphoth. There's also a quick chapter analysis of Qliphoth, but this is where it really gets interesting. There's an analysis of the Bible verse right here from Genesis 10:15 through 18, and it reads, Canaan begot Sidon, the preeminent, along with the Chedi, the Yebusi, the Amori, the Gregoshi, the Kavi, the Araki, the Sani, the Arvadi, the Samari, and the Chamati, and thus were the Canaanite tribes dispersed. Canaan, the son of Ham, one of the sons of Noah, from Canaan, Gematria 190, meaning lowland or valley, from the root Cana, to be brought low or humbled. Canaan, therefore, can be esoterically connected to the valley of the shadow of death, the Gia Selmeveth, the portal between life and death, where the dying wander at the threshold of exiting the universe, the low place of death's shade, and his 11 children, forming the tribes who are types or faces of necromantic vampiric shadow forms. This further emphasized by the fact the word for Canaanite, the Canaani energy current 200, is a gematria match for the following words: Quasam, divination, witchcraft, indicating necromantic energy; Oimoi, an interjection meaning woe is me, indicating personal misfortune or defeat; or see Oive, if you're one of the chosen. I interjected there that Oive wasn't in the book. Matzah, couch or bed, indicative of the sleep of death. Emetz, Aramaic, to close shut eyes, be blinded, indicating spiritual death. Yaquatz, to awaken, become active, suggesting occult initiation which transcends the sight of eyes. Salawam, locust, predatory insect, esoterically connected to demonic energy and vampirism. I'm not going to read all of them because this video will be hours and hours long. Here we see the Canaanites as carriers of esoteric energy 200, a priesthood of necromantic revenant predators awakened from the sleep of death, possessed by malevolence, and who drink the blood from puncture wounds. A vivid portrayal for the cult of vampirism as depicted by modern Western folklore. On page 59, the middle paragraph. Canaan is also related to, in the mythology of Judeo-Christianity, falls from grace, fallen angels, divine judgment upon wickedness. According to mythology of the book of Exodus, Yahweh commanded Moses to invade the land of Canaan, murder its inhabitants, and annex its villages for the children of Israel. From the perspective of occult doctrine, this clearly places Canaan as the emitter of energy that opposes the right-hand path and represents war and hostility against its agenda of subjugation. On page 60, black magicians, however, derive their power from accepting that they are enemies of the right-hand path and its bastard, tyrannical dictator, Yahweh, and by resigning themselves to receiving and learning consciously navigate these adversarial currents, are able to transmute the symbolic klepothic prisons of divine punishment into ascended spiritual degrees of magical supremacy, as current 117 forks via its flirtation through the eternal dual conflict of Tamiel into the parallel facets of cognizance. On page 62, the tribes of Canaan as necromantic shades. The 11 sons of Canaan beget the 11 tribes, each of which represents a class of vampiric shade, each ruled by a demonic prince or chief who can be summoned using any of the various techniques of ritual conjuration or goetic exorcism. Each channels energy from one of the distorted 11 hells of the Qliphoth. In particularly, Canaanite necromantic vampire tribes represent the Qliphotic Partsifum of Malkuth Lila, kingdom of Night, also known as Lilith, the demonic antinode of Malkuth kingdom. While Malkuth represents Eden, the primordial perfect material world, Malkuth Lila represents the night side of Eden, to borrow the phrase coined by Kenneth Grant, the gates of darkness that lead into wickedness, death, and hell. The Partsifum is a dynamic, whereas all Sephiroth are embedded in a single Sephiroth. An example, the Partsifum of the Sephiroth of Keter are emanations of the Sephiroth of Malkuth, Yasad, Netzach, Had, Tippereth, Yeshed, Kibura, Chokma, Binah, Kether, as they resonate within a single numeration of Kether. And interjection. So what this basically is saying is that each of these spheres contains a fractal, a microcosm of the entire tree itself. So there is a Venus of Mars. There is also a Jupiter of Mars. There is a Neptune and Pluto within Saturn. There is a Saturn of Saturn, and so on. On page 63, there is a table, Vampiric Genera of Canaan, the Clepothic Partsifum of Lilith, and this is just for the Clepothic spirit of Lilith here. Klippa, Melkuth, Lila, or Lilith, meaning Kingdom of Night. Vampiric Genius, Chamati, which means Mausoleum of Wraiths, and its Ekcharts is Asia. Shevaoth, the false accusers, the vampiric genius is Yarvadi, the wanderers, and its exarch is Reboth Gethax. Zulanaim, which means devourment, its vampiric genius is Gregoshi, meaning ghouls, and its exarch is Dabrogreb. Of course, I'm not reading the whole table, that's just a sample. On page 66. Current 11 then evokes maleficent predatory energy as an image of insolent, heretical, spiritual locust with a dormant cycle hiding them emerging, who glows embers, represent predatory nothingness, attack via piercing and penetrating, cause terror, speak or breathe evil, and ultimately reveal a secret priesthood substrate of consciousness possessed by those rare magicians who are able to master this manifold energy and hold in their imagination its complex, dynamic lattices, therefore lifting their awareness up and into arcane, exotic states conducive to occult mastery and spiritual promotion. The secret fraternity of advanced middle pillar Satanists are the Sacerdotium Umbrae Mortis. Current 2970. The total gematria of all the 11 tribes of Canaan is 2970, which is 11 times 270. The following 11 revenant virtues, each gematria 270, also a total 2970. These satanic virtues require a great deal of advancement to ritually master and are a prime example of why rites of black magic have historically come with a warning against madness. Keep in mind that psychopathic and narcissistic disorders, as well as various psychoses, are all forms of madness. See introduction for more details and proceed at your own risk, as the consequences of your actions are your sole responsibility. I'm not going to read all the 11 revenant virtues, but I'm just going to share a couple of them with you to give an idea, to give you more idea of what this current sorcery is all about. Amnimity, an anagram for Rar meaning enmity, accursedness, from Quesath. Anger, divine wrath, both as transmitter and recipient, in the sense of vampire legend, is a creature whose condition is a curse of divine wrath. Coercion, meaning sold, from a root word meaning salesman, indicating skill at the art of manipulation and control of others, or mind control. Suffering, from Yazor, punishment, chastening, discipline. Hunger, from Charon, hollowness, destructive, predatory hunger, the first half of Choronzon, the hollow, devourer, guardian of the abyss, and Crowleyan magic. Heresy, idolatry, heathenism, turning away from the right-hand path, rejection of orthodoxy and ritual, oppositional defiance, misfortune, Nekar, calamity, disaster, and misfortune. Below is a list of the Canaanite vampire classes and the virtues they teach, and the tenacious and dedicated supplicant. To the dedicated and tenacious supplicant. While each of the vampiric classes and their ruling princes are adept in the balance and mastery of all these virtues, as tutelary demons, each emanates a specific aspect as follows. So, vampiric shadow Sidion, its essence king, its virtue enmity. Cheti, terror, accursedness. Yabusi, desecration and evil. Emori, incantations and coercions. Gregoshi, soil and suffering. So the whole book has a basic pattern. You're going to be invoking these spirits and these shades, and they're going to do these things to you. They're going to bring you accursedness. They're going to bring you evil, coercion, and suffering. But by bathing you in all this pain and just all this anguish and death there, it's supposed to harden up your soul. And while you can for those, and they're very few and far in between, who can juggle all these 11 terrors and curses and just all the suffering, pain, and death, who can balance and juggle and master all these things, you will become that incarnate and become a vampiric super predator on the astral plane. and could just basically feed off others and just take a lot of power, all by taking the lives and life force energy of others. Self-initiation. Your company are the gods. See, the dead are your company, from the Baal cycles. Now this is where it really gets dangerous and sketchy. Okay, we're on page 70 now, a little more almost halfway through the book. The book is only 207 pages long, so we're 1/3 of the way through the book there, and we finally got the first actual ritual in the book called the Rite of the 13 Cemeteries, or the Rite of Infection. Now how this works is basically you're going to collect soil from 13 different cemeteries, and once you get soil from 13 cemeteries, then on the 13th cemetery, this is a night that you spend at the cemetery. They have you do it at a specific day of the week in a certain hours, and you perform the incantation of the 13 cemeteries, which is to Satan, Tiamat, Hecate, Kali, and other various predatory dark archetypes and dark malevolent forces from various cultures. And basically what you're doing is you're asking them to latch onto you. You're asking them to infect your core essence. This is an invocation in the truest sense. Now, keep in mind that when you perform an invocation, you are exchanging energy. You are exchanging your soul. You are swapping genetics, both in the blood and in your astral bodies. You're actually swapping genetic and soul code information between yourself and between that which you're actually invoking. So, for example, you invoke a Klepothic spirit or a Goetia enough times, you'll become a microcosm of that spirit. You'll evoke Satan enough times, or Beelzebub enough times, you will become a miniature Belial incarnate. And that's why invocation is so dangerous, because all the Western magic of organized occultism, both light and dark brotherhoods, it all revolves around the invocation of spirits. And these people who practice Kabbalah and the OTO and Golden Dawn, the people who practice the Qliphoth and Satanism, it's all the same thing. They become puppets, but maybe in the White Lodge you become a puppet, a complete, sock puppet with no more individuality for the Archangel Michael. And there are warnings against this too, even in this book, that you'll become mad or become a puppet for these Qliphothic forces in Satanism. So it's really the same thing. Kabbalah is just really all about, just fucking with your own individuality, fucking with your ego, and just, letting just other things in. And I'm not about that practice anymore, and if you don't know why, that answer is on my other channel. But basically, you're going to invoke all these dark archetypes, and you're going to ask them to infect you. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but page 71. Not going to say it. Demon orders of the Qliphoth, Tiamatic teratomas, and all curious imps of malevolence. And then you're asking them to come to you, all thirst for life force. And it says to let yourself, cure your loneliness with my suffering, satiating your hunger with my vitality. So you're asking them to feed upon you. This particular invocation is like 4 pages long, and there's another paragraph on page 73 that's still in the invocation. It calls upon the Horeb Lamash 2, baneful Shakti, chimera of the spirit of 7 witches, mistress of Queen Aeon slithering. Not going to read it. Send your skulking serpents. Not going to read that. With stalking. So that the sorcerer might accumulate the essence of night, shedding of the ego corpse of the former self. That's all Kabbalah. I'm not about the shedding or fucking with the ego. The ego isn't the problem here. Continuing. Increase of victims, growing a motile vivification, the beastly hunger. I hail your 7 witching names. And it gives us a daughter of a new, sister of the gods of the streets, sword who strikes ahead, the one in flames, goddess of the terrible face, caretaker and the controller of those who slay, Ashtaroth's hand. Ashtaroth's hand. And lastly, after you summoned all these dark archetypes and monsters there, you call upon the genius, the hungry ghost, genius loci, the hungry ghosts, the phantoms, wandering spirits, the spirits of the cemetery. Then you're supposed to offer yourself to cure their loneliness with your suffering, to satisfy their thirst with your vitality. And you're supposed to accept the injection of the venom of Samael, the kiss of Samael, Satan, the divine opium, and Gret High Priest, the initiation of the black arts. Then you hail all the spirits, and so mote it be. I didn't really read that. I changed some things around there because I'm not about this. I'm not going to bring it in there. But basically, to give you an idea, that's what you're dealing with. Then you have to, you can stay there for a while, but you have to leave before sunrise. Then what I really liked about this book when I first got it is it has the self-burial ritual, the self-burial rite. Now what this means is that literally what it means, you're going to bury yourself. You can be a mausoleum, it can be a casket, but the author just recommends you can just lock yourself up in a closet for 6 to 8 hours, or you just put yourself in a box, and don't really bury it or just put a weight on it so you can't open it. And of course, the safety precautions, like have vent holes and everything. But what I think is so cool about this is just to interject here. They got that sensory deprivation pods now, so you can lay down, in a water flotation tank, they call it. So you can lay down in a tank full of salt water in complete black, and you're supposed to astral project or have some sort of psychedelic experience, and elevate your consciousness. What's so interesting about that is that's modern. That's back in fashion. Everyone thinks it's this like new trend or something. It really isn't. These sorts of this kind of sorcery and initiations have been around for thousands of years, except maybe they didn't have flotation tanks, back in Canaan, back in the old days, or back in these centuries there. Instead, they put you in a box and they bury you alive, and then they disinter you. They dig you back up several hours later. Of course, obviously, now this is just a current that the author has drummed up with all the research and development work with the clip-off. I'm not saying that the Canaanites actually did this shit. They probably did something different there. And with the self-burial, obviously this is a much more extreme version than just a regular flotation tank, because on page 76 it reads, the rite of self-burial based on the ceremonial use of the following 3 experiences concurrently as a tool for self-discovery and advancement of consciousness. Claustrophobia, where the witch voluntarily submits to being confined to a small dark place for a sufficient amount of time to induce anxiety or phobic response. Sensory deprivation, the confinement will be a place that is remote enough or insulated enough to retard sensory input, allowing confined witch to experience self-analysis without distraction. Sorcerer consciousness, sufficient confinement in a claustrophobic space that limits movement or sensory input will eventually result in altered visionary states of consciousness. This process may be aided by the use of ceremonial entheogens and other psychedelic drugs. The proper combination of initiatory states are performed to strengthen the bond between the initiate and the demonic, venomous currents of necromancy and vampirism she seeks to absorb and understand by ceremonially rehearsing her own death, as a necromantic rite. This informal ceremony can be performed at any time, so as long as the symbolic burial chamber is sufficiently dark and insulated from outside noise. The period of confinement will vary depending on the resolve and emotional strength of the practitioner. Some examples of this ritual might to lock oneself in a closet or in a mausoleum overnight, or in a tomb or crypt. The effectiveness of the symbolic self-negating interment may be accentuated by experiencing the confinement while dosed on LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, or other similar mind-altering substance. 2 books on the use of entheogens are given in the reference section of this book: Food of the Gods by Terence McKenna, Plants of the Gods edited by Richard Schultz and Albert Hoffman. Both provide exhaustive research and anecdotal information on the proper and effective use of mind-altering substances. However, use of these drugs can lead to unpredictable behavior in the emotionally fragile, and many of them are illegal. And then you're going to wrap yourself up in a burial cloth, and it gives the talismans and symbols you're going to draw on it later in the book. And then the times may vary, but it recommends 6 to 8 hours may do the trick. It says the most effective, but also the most dangerous form of ritual is to be buried alive for a period of hours. Now, you don't have to bury alive, but you can put someone in a casket and just put a lock on it, or just put a bunch of weights on it, and of course, have ventilation, so they can breathe and everything, and then have someone there with you to witness the rite, and then they can just get you out there in case of emergency or anything like that. Then it has instructions on how to create a mirror gate. And this is basically, in this sorcery, this is basically, it's equivalent of the dark portal, the obsidian sphere mirror gate, or the scrying mirror, or the triangle of evocation. Then it has the 4 poison serpents of astral travel, sleep paralysis, Loki, angel of battle, and it's not the German Loki, L-O-K-I. It's spelled L-O-K-E-Y. Angel of battle, Loki. Second serpent is the fear of death, is ruled over by Rael, the angel of wisdom. Astral entrance is Papi, angel of exaltation. And the 4th serpent is Gnosis, which is ruled over by Kekor, the angel of understanding. Then it has a beautiful conjuration circle, which it almost looks like a Far Eastern yantra. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's a strange looking cubical cross that's square with the 4 arms extending out of it. And this book makes heavy use of multiple fonts, including Hebrew, Thebaean, Passing the River, Malachim, and the Magi alphabet. So just give me an example. This is what it looks like. Beelzebub, Leviathan, Eborim, and Behemoth. It includes many ciphers as well. Page 92 reads in 1 Chronicles 23:9, which provides a key understanding and manifesting the goal of the work of this vocation. The descendants of Hebron included Jeriah the first, Eremiah the second, Jahaziel the third, and Jekamin the fourth. The occult doctrine of this passage is decrypted by the following exegesis of the underlying ciphers in the text, which read in its original language. Stages of initiation. Hebron, the progenitor of these rites, means association and presents the lattice of occult correspondences, which are the underpinnings of the spheres of awareness and potencies at the heart of this discourse. Hebron's gematria is the current 266 and denotes the following 4 stages of initiation of the priesthood through the correspondences of the following words, each which matching gematria: spiritual infection, the transmogrification of the astral body from positive and giving into negative, hungry, predatory vampire by means of the word Shabron, an anagram of Hebron meaning drought and denoting continual thirst. Physical death, denunciation of the right hand path, and a turning from life to death via correspondence with the word Sur, which means turning aside or departing, as well as degeneracy, as in the degenerative putrefaction of a corpse, which the word also means temple gate, an instance of temple, cemetery, and mausoleum rituals, infernal necromancy, and vampiric predatory sorcery. I like to interject there, infernal necromancy. It should say negromancy, which is the summoning of evil spirits, black horrors, and, shit like that. The unforgiven soul from the Red King, or summoning, these infernal, these Canaanite tribes, these Canaanite shades of powerful ancient, sorcerers, these sorcerers of the cults of Moloch, the cults of Chemosh. Continuing on, revenants, the adoption of the soul or personality of symbolic post-mortem traits of the revenant through the word Benshur, or son of whiteness, the first stage of vampiric resurrection, where the divine curse has begun to transform the initiate into a magician who is under control of ravenous malevolence, currently beyond her control. At this point, a new priest of the SVM begins to learn, assimilate, grow proficient in, and eventually subdue and master the baneful energy currents and attributes and virtues enumerated within the sacerdotal structure. Okay, on 95, this necromantic scrying mirror, again with the Hebrew, with the Theban, the passing river, and the Magi alphabet. And it's using all these languages and symbols for a reason. Again, I don't condone any of this work, but if you're going to do it, you better fucking pay attention. You better follow it to the letter, because there is much danger in this work. Very, very dangerous work. You risk losing your mind and risk losing your soul. And most of all, most people, 99 people out of 100, witches who actually are mad enough to attempt this stuff in this book, are going to become puppets for these shades, for these, tribes of Canaan and the clip-off. On 96, there's an interesting Bible verse here. Proverbs 30:14 through 16. Some have swords for teeth and knives for fangs, to devour the afflicted from the earth and the needy from among mankind. The bloodsucker has twin daughters. Give and give. 3 things will never be satisfied. 4 will never say enough. The grave, the barren womb, the soil that demands water and fire, they never say enough. This passage is loaded with occult potency. First, describes a type of people with knife-shaped fangs who devour the weak. They have 2 daughters, which can be taken as symbolic of the vampire's 2 fangs, which give, in addition to taking, indicative of the injection of vampiric energy into the victim. Also, the grave, as translated as the afterlife, and the barren womb are explicitly mentioned, typifying death and post-mortem consciousness. Furthermore, insatiable hunger is mentioned. The 4 things that are never satisfied are the insatiable elemental hungers that delineate the 4-dimensional esoteric structure of the predatory appetite. And then it gives the 4 elemental vampire drives. Shoel, the afterlife, the tomb. Air, hunger to take possession of souls. Etzer, Rakam, the barren womb. Water, hunger to destroy innocence. Aretz, soil. Earth, hunger to take physical life. And Esh, fire, anger, hunger to inflict suffering. The total gematria of these terms is 1537. The number of the word catechesis, possession, and megalosun, divinity, suggesting the image of divine possession of that insatiable appetites of vampirism from the point of view esoteric meditation, a magical sphere of awareness, an act of possession by evil, are a form of divine punishment, which is position upheld by traditional discourses on the subject. C.F. Montague Summers. Page 100. The scrying mirror incorporates these multifarious potentialities in the form of occult ciphers arranged to open a door to dimensions of the clip-off. The inner circle should be a polished black mirror which will serve as a focal point of meditation and communion with the demonic spirits and exarchs enumerated therein, which are freed from hells of the deepest self and temporarily imprisoned within the mirror. The mirror becomes a projection onto a two-dimensional sphere from the chthonic subabyssal dimensions of convoluted shadow hypospace, flanked by the 11 essential vampiric attributes in the 4 elemental hungers, as well as the attractor sigils of the Sacerdotium gate 354. And that's the Sacerdotium gate, the alchemical marriage of Chemosh and Tiamat. The negative ciphers, characters, and alchemical essences will entice the salient, ravenant spirits through the gateway into the mirror. Surrounding the gazing glass are 2 protective circles, one circumscribed with the Hebrew cipher and the other with Greek. Both passages total 2970, the gematria number of the 11 tribes of Canaan. These cipher foils will lock in the baleful energy within the symbolic hyper-surface of the mirror and keep the phantom fiends from escaping into the physical universe. In context of ceremonial conjuration, this can be taught as an ornate way of saying that it protects the magician from crossing a line of rationality into psychosis, whereas the apparitions of the Qliphoth inexorably commingle with the faculties of the witch's consciousness, function responsible for determining fantasy from reality, causing a dangerous and often irrevocable diminishing of the ability to distinguish between the two, which is primarily diagnostic tag for psychosis. Refer to the warnings against madness in the introduction. The first protective circle keeps the entities themselves imprisoned within those spheres of consciousness that allow conscious interaction with the severed members of the collective universal self, while safely protecting the magician from blurring the lines between rationality and insanity. The second protective circle resists escape of any residual malicious radiation from escaping and doing more subtle and unpredictable damage to the psyche of the practitioner of this high and rarefied art. The spirits can be evoked and drawn into the mirror from the Qliphothic tunnels, revoked and dispelled back out of the mirror and into those self-same tunnels, memorizing and intoning the power words given for each class of entities later in the text. The magician must learn to detect or feel when the mantra has been chanted sufficiently to summon or re-signed aspirations from the various families of voracious demonic specters and their ruling princes, itemized later. The entire scrying mirror should be constructed so it is large enough for comfortable viewing within the conjuration circle and should be hung or mounted outside the circle at eye level as a reasonable, comfortable distance. Then it gives the priestly garb that you're going to be wearing, the robe and the epitrachathelion. So basically a big, I think it might be the same burial cloth that you buried yourself in earlier in the book. And it gives the proper symbols and everything. The epitrachathelion, or the priestly breastplate with the seal on it. So I just want to inject here very, very old Hebrew magic there. So we're basically going back to what we're doing here. We're going back to, Canaan, Philistines, the various breastplates and gear and stuff that the Ephesians wore. It doesn't have to be the exact, thing that the Ephesians wore themselves, but it is specific to this current. So the breastplate has a Qliphothic symbolism with the ciphers, the Ari tree configuration, and the sigil ciphers in the passing the river alphabet, and you're going to engrave these symbols, on a specific metal, consecrate them at a specific time, and you're going to wear them to basically attune your body and astral bodies to the current. It's very, very deep and very heavy stuff dealing with, you have to do it at certain specific hours of the day, just specific planetary days of the week. It's very, very labor intensive, and very, very few people are able to even just keep up with it. The upper breastplate and the lower vampiric seal of Satan, and both of these are given right here. So it looks like this and this. And then it gives the seal that you're going to put on the burial shawl, the undecagrammaton, and you're just going to paint that or draw that onto the burial shawl that you wrap yourself up in. On page 116 is a very interesting passage about the altar bell of Paimon, King Paimon. The ninth demon of the Goetia corresponds to the word Paimon, meaning bell, and his appearance within the circle of conjuration is accompanied by trumpets, cymbals, and other brazen instruments. The energy of Paimon is carried by the altar bell and begins and ends in ceremonies. He presides over dreams and visions, helps a magician to discern between dreams of prophetic significance and anxiety dreams. It is no wonder that his sigil resembles a bedpost. You're going to create a few more instruments, in that you're going to be carving some of his ciphers and sigils, the author's symbols that he made onto candlesticks, onto daggers, onto stakes, and so on. There's a censer in the shape of the Klepothic undecagram, or the 11-pointed star. Then there's where it gets like really, really dirty, really like hands-on, getting your hands, muddy in the sorcery. This is what I like about this book. Not that I'd ever attempt this shit, but what I like about it, it's got some, as you're about to see in a minute, from like Paolo Mayambi and like other cults there. The grave, receptacle of the mysteries of the clip-off of and Canaanite vampiric shades. For the cauldron, the witch must procure a mystical, symbolic grave which houses the mysteries of the shadows of death. It should be a funerary urn or ossuary large enough for her to place all the relics which follow. First, she must place the relics in each of the 11 sacraments of the Qliphoth, which were enumerated earlier. The 11th sacrament, money, should be in the form of 30 silver coins from a foreign country. In addition, the following items will be added. For Sidion, a buckle taken from a muzzle that has been used to subdue a vicious dog. For the Chedi, a piece of thigh bone from the skeleton of an infant child, or fragments from bones from 3 or more wild predatory beasts. For the Ibushi, a black widow spider, or the spring from a bird trap. For the Amori, a razor blade, or the skull of a raven. For the Gregoshi, a shard from a roof or tomb of mausoleum, from a house where someone has died, or bark from a tree growing in a witch's grove. For the Kavi, a worm or an animal who crawls through the earth, or mandrake root. For the Iraqi, flesh from the tongue of a male goat. For the Arvadi, a rosary taken from a bruised neck. For the Samari, a nail that has been driven into a Bible that has been trampled and thrown down into a spring or fountain, or a bone from a bird of prey that has been crushed under the left foot. Items should be covered with dirt from the 13 cemeteries, 9 crossroads, and 11 gates. The dirt is to be poured into a grave cauldron that is nearly full and should be mixed with human bone held in the left hand and fed with blood or life. The flower must be then transplanted into the dirt and allowed to die. A jewel or a precious stone is then pressed into the dirt, which is then compressed with dead flour, flattened by beating it with the heel of the left shoe on the day of Mars and the hour of Saturn. See appendices for tables of days and hours. Finally, the rib of a man is plunged into the dirt so that it thrusts upwards out of the soil, surrounded by 11 porcupine quills or large thorns planted similarly. And then there's an actual photo of himself mixing the 13 cemetery's dirt with the human femur bone held in the left hand. Now, obviously, that's pretty big. That's not the femur bone of a child. So, what I think, straight up, I'm going to interject here, that he's bullshitting, somewhat here. Just like it's called blinders. Like in the old grimoires, you got to get, the beak of a cock, the eye of a lizard or something, a goat or cow tongue from a foreign country. Just all this shit, the really like strange, like weird items that you had to procure, like in the old grimoires, like the Grimoire Verum, the Grand Grimoire, the Magic of Arbitel, and so on. What this does is, difficult obtained items. It's an act of devotion and an act of labor of love. If you really love the work, then you will find a way to procure the items, and they each hold a very symbolic significance too. So the purpose of procuring all these strange and like weird items is to, not only is the item a symbol of consciousness in and of itself, but it attunes you to the current of the energy there. And just, by willing and actually going out there and getting these strange, weird, and illegal items will create an antinomian personality, will create a complex within the individual. The breaking of the taboos there will, if you are not afraid to break the law, then you can go beyond all limits. We're on page 129 now. We're almost to the end of the book. The grade of Jiraiya, the first step of the priesthood are the rites of Jiraiya, which involve diligent study, mastery of the parameters of the system, and exploring the arcane mysteries through the meditation and ultimately conjuration of phantoms of the 11 vampiric shadow forms. Conjuration of their kings will come later. Memorize and study the 4 vampiric hungers. Memorize and study the 11th sacraments of vampirism. Memorize and study the 11 attributes of vampirism. Memorize and study the 11 ravenant virtues. Memorize and study the 10 classes of vampiric shadow forms. Perform the rite of conjuration to invoke specters from each of the classes of vampiric shades, asking them to teach you their specific virtue and establishing a relationship whereby you may call upon them in daily experience. I'm not going to give the order there, but if you've been paying attention, you've already heard the names. And then the different grades are, the first grade, like the grade of Jiraiya, you're calling upon the Yabusi, the Grigoshi, and so on, and just making contact with them. And then the upgrades, you're doing the more complex rituals, like the, constructing of the mirror gate, and so on. Then beyond this, eventually, once you've passed all these, the author says then you're then allowed to create your own rituals and everything. There's one more ritual given here, actually multiple. There's a ritual of discharge, vampiric discharge, so all the toxic energy and shit that you've done and like contacted with, you expel it from you. I guess it's this current's version of a grounding ritual. And a ritual on how to create an egregore or a vampiric spirit servitor is given, and you're gonna get a coffin or a box. You're gonna construct, basic shape or something out of your egregore, out of some items. And there's actually a picture of the egregore in their spirit, with a piece of clothing or cloth there. And I can tell that that's a leather Baphomet mask in there, and there's going to be Some other items that you're going to put in there, like a centipede, a tarantula, a scorpion, the head of a rattlesnake, oil of leech, something stolen, goofer dust, a book about vampires. This book, the Sacerdotium, Umbrae, Mortis, were not in use. And something silver goblet to symbolize feeding. And full instructions are given in the book. So we're pretty much at the end of the book there. Further studies, he gives recommendations. Akaru by Michael W. Ford, the works of Michel Bellinger, The Complete Vampire by Nigel Jackson, Vampires by Constantino, Spiral Dynamics by Don Edward Beck and Christopher Cowan, Neuro-Linguistic Program by Barbara P. Gibson, Subliminal by Leonard Maldonado, Crowds and Power by Elias Canetti. And then the final chapter of the book is The Shadows of Death and the appendix there. So these are the actual Klipothic seals in the book. So Sidion, I'm not going to read all of them, just giving an example there. King of the Canaanite Shadow Forms, Mars and Fire. It's a conjuration seal of Sidion. And then there's an esoteric formula, the barbarous names that you're going to vibrate in order to call up this energy. The Chedi, the Children of Terror, Sun and Fire. The Conjuring Seal of the Gregoshi, the Children of the Soil, Jupiter and Fire. And then it has a table of the names and the planets and the sounds that you're going to make in order to conjure up its energy. And last but not least, the actual penances themselves is a Sathurian calendar with all the planetary hours and correspondences on it. It's got the days and hours, and you can actually read the tables themselves. I like that. It's not unlike the soft cover books by that John Putineo guy, Asha Shadim. Completely different author. I just had to bring this up because I have some of Asha Shadim's books, and he has like tables and shit in there, and it's completely illegible. The resolution is so horrible you can't even read it. But in this book, Gilles de Laval, you can read the tables and all the names in there. I like that he also includes the Hebrew and Gematria ciphers. He includes the Gematria and Theban ciphers. He has the Luciferian Gematria, and he has his own book. He has another book out there called The Explicit Name of Lucifer, which is the entire Hebrew cipher that he created for the work there. And then there's some references, where he's quoting, all this stuff in this book. There's tons of books in there, like Crowley, of course, Michael Ford, Blood Sorcery Bible by Cagliostro, Creating Magical Entities by David Cunningham Michaels, Crowds and Power by Canetti, Domination, How to Bend Others to Your Will, Riva Anna, Egyptian Magic by Schuler Gerald and Schuler Betty, Energy Vampires by Dorothy Harbour, Food of the Gods, obviously, by Terence McKenna, Kabbalah by Sholem, Night Side of Eden, Kenneth Grant. And there's pages and pages. worth of more reference material that you can study. Now, my closing comments on this book, now I don't condone Kabbalah, the practice of Kabbalah or Klapoth, because it's a closed system. I don't practice this myself, but I've owned this book for almost a year now, and it's got very useful, very good information in it. I would never attempt any of the rites and shit in there. Now, what I think is actually going on here in this book there is what the author is doing, and what some of the other sorcerers, like Become a Living God, Eric Coetting's doing, is that they do their own works, right? But then they get fed upon by spirits. So in order to not be fed upon by spirits, they publish their work and they have other people do it. So other people get fed upon by the spirits and not the authors themselves. Kind of like a pyramid model, a pyramid scheme. Like how the OTO, Golden Dawn, and these other like white and dark brotherhoods, they have a pyramidal structure where, at the very, very tippy top, very, very adept dark sorcerers at, the dark arts of manipulation and control and, feeding upon others. So, in order to completely not implode, in on the currents of under the weight of the dark sorcery and the dark magic, they publish their work, and they get, those few other people to practice it for themselves, and it creates like a pyramidal structure. So the neophytes who practice a book, and most of them will get fed upon. Most of them will, if not all of them, will be fucked up by the work somehow. And then their energy will go up to the next level and all the way back up to the author. It's kind of, basically like a pyramid, to hold themselves up under, all the weight of all the devotees. So this is basically kind of the shit that's going on. I don't condone, this practice, because it's pretty much just like the same thing as what the church is doing, taking all the energy, the worshipers every Sunday, and then giving it to the priests and giving it, to the rabbis to do what they want with it. So this is basically just the same thing, but in reverse. And the rite of infection, like, why would you want to do that? That's insane. That's a good way to get damned, and completely harvested. You're allowing fucking spirits, to feed off you and just bring them into your body. Now, if that's your thing and you want to do that, then go ahead, do all that and fuck yourself up and, become a puppet and all the other great risks that come with doing that practice. Now, I'm not saying, that it's going to happen to everyone. There's a few people who they have the fortitude to actually play with that shit and come out, with minimal destruction. But even then, because the Ari configuration is distorted, everyone who practices this work, even them, they will hit a ceiling sooner or later with the book there. Now, Gilles de Laval, also known as Gilles de Reyes, he is in a United States black metal band called Terrorism. He also has other books out there. The only other book I have by him is the Sefer Ruachot, Grimoire of Lunar Spirits. He is the author of Black Magic Evocation of the Shem HaMepharash. He is author of The Explicit Name of Lucifer, and he is also the author of the most recent publication there, Rites of Nullification. And just for a fun fact, there is a Swedish black metal band called Mepharash, and all of their lyrics is based off the books and occultism of Gilles de Laval. And they even released an album called 1557, Rites of Nullification. And the Rites of Nullification by Gilles de Laval, that's expounds upon that. So if you're into that kind of shit, Kabbalah, Koala, and you want to hit a ceiling or whatever like that, then go check out all of his other works. But at the end of the day, um, there is no law beyond do what thou wilt. You're going to do what you want to do, and whatever consequences that you're going to face by playing with that sort of stuff, there is going to be your sole responsibility only.